A senhora Maria Pérez.
Maria Pérez is director of the health validation. She's a doctor in medicine. Management of public health systems, validation of products and services, and validation of different medicines. And she's been a professor in different schools of technology in the Mercosur, the Commission of Medicines of Mercosur, INAPRA, and RIMACH. No se escucha.
Bien. Sí, bueno.
Good morning. I'm going to share this panel dealing with such an important theme for us and for the region. So at this panel, we have a diverse group, people coming from different countries and disciplines. So first of all, I'm going to quote on Claudia Vaca from Colombia. You all know her. She has a long track record. She's a pharmacist, and she has been working for over 15 years in the public sector in the definition of health policies. And she's a member of a consultancy commission of WHO for the safety of medicines. This is a very, very summarized CV. After her, we will have Yuri Carvajal, a professor, university professor from Chile, a physician, so a different profession, and he helps to increase the male rate at this session because most of us are women here. He has been an editor of several journals, and he has also been the director of health care services in Chile. And finally, Ana Maria Pacón. She's a lawyer from Peru. She's a university professor in several countries, in Peru, in Spain, in Valencia. She's a professor of IP, also at the university in Venezuela. She's a WIPO expert in dispute resolution, and she's in the list of mediators of the WIPO. And without further ado, we will give the floor to the first speaker. Claudia, please try to stick to your 20 minutes. Thank you very much, Ana Maria, for your introduction. And thank you very much to Isaacs for having invited me. And also because you have included this issue on the agenda. And I think my goal today is to encourage you, to motivate you, and leave you with some messages related to the theme of access to patents, but with a focus on what we call today biologicals, a group of which are the so-called biotechnological products, which call for a lot of R&D, and where most of the new developments are taking place today with quite high prices. So it's a very good opportunity to think about all this. My agenda for this presentation is the following one. I'm going to give you the context, the framework to describe and tell you how the discussion on biologicals or biosimilars is exactly the same discussion which we had about competition in the pharmaceutical industry and generics. What we had in the past between traditional drugs and generics is what we're having today with other medications and biologicals. I'm going to talk about the barriers to access by blocking out the competition when the health standards for the launching of these products into the market are being discussed. I'm going to talk about the scenarios of the global discussion on this issue, and I think it's the discussion we had early this morning was quite relevant because it showed clearly the dilemma on to what extent technical fora have political elements or components and to what extent political decisions have a technical consequence. So the decision that countries would have to make is maybe they should train technicians who are experts in negotiating, and also they should train diplomats that are trained on the technical issues. This was said this morning. And finally, I'd like to tell you about the role of the countries in the South, and not only the countries from UNASUR, but actually the countries of the South in the area of health standard for biologicals, and trying to find a consistent way forward. The dynamics of innovation in the area of biotechnology is really intense. The volume of new chemical entities associated to this technology grows really fast. The FDA licensed 24 new chemical entities in 2004. 8 of them were biologicals, and today in 2013, 6 years later, 47 new entities were authorized and 25 were biological. These figures should send a warning to us. They should tell us on which technical discussions we should focus, on what technical skills we need. And it's also relevant because in this group of product, there is a scenario, a real scenario, an avoidable one, which is the arrival of competitors or competition really fast. This was published in Health Affairs in April this year. It was written by Grabowski et al. And it also involved a team of consultants, and they analyzed a group of biologicals that were leading products in the US market. They looked at the sales and the future scenario for new patents. For that list of leading products, if you look at this, the patents will expire between 2014 and 2018 or 19, and this means that generics will make it into this market. Generics, which in a technical language are called biosimilars, but which are also called biocompetitors, second-level entry proteins, etc. But they are just generics. Generics that compete with medications whose patents are going to expire. But look at the volumes, look at the sales volumes of these products. And this is threatening not only the healthcare systems of emerging countries. You don't find these products in abundance in emerging countries because they cannot afford it. But this is also a problem for developed countries. In red, I have signaled trastuzumab, a monoclonal antibody whose patent in the US will expire in 2016, but which expires this year in Europe. Trastuzumab is used in a condition which we may define as a type 1 disease with a high mortality, and which accounts or which represents the typical case of a disease whose mortality is related to inequalities. Breast cancer, the mortality of death cancer, is much higher in poor countries because they don't have access to certain drugs. But it's one kind of breast cancer which has been identified with an overexpression of a gene which is called ER2. When we find that women have this overexpression of this gene, ER2, it's possible to cure them. There is a treatment for this kind of cancer which has shown to be effective and which has changed the evolution, the natural evolution of this disease in such cases. Both the drug and the test, the diagnosis test for genotyping, are of biotechnological origin. It's two elements that have to come together. If I pay for the drug, I should have run the test earlier on. Giving this drug to a lady who has no overexpression of such gene makes no sense. And this has been identified as a candidate to be included in the list of essential medications of the World Trade Organization. But this means that the test should also be included in a list. So the patentability of this product was analyzed, and the price of the product, trastuzumab, is too expensive for many, many countries. Colombia has just included it 2 years ago after going through a price regulation process which was really tough. Thanks to an internal referencing, the price was cut by almost 30% for Colombia, and now it is included in our healthcare system. But it's the same drug in Bolivia. We analyzed the cost, effectiveness, and the relationship of prices in all Latin American countries. For this product to be cost-effective in Bolivia, it should cost $200. Do you think that through negotiations you could go from $2,000 to $200 for a product? Would you be able to negotiate this even if you think it's cost-effective to use the drug? Of course, the price control strategies won't allow for this to happen. And the only way in which we could bring down the price would be through competition. Well, there are 11 biosimilars in the pipeline for this product. Some of them are more similar than others because one is being developed by Ospira, a U.S. company, another one is being developed by BioExpress, a Swiss company, and one is being developed by Amgen, a U.S. company, and they want their products, their biosimilars, the ones they have in the pipeline, well, they want standards to be high enough so that those that are not that similar or that are less similar may not make it into the market. It won't be easy for those 11 biosimilars to go into all the markets. It depends basically on the healthcare standards for the entry of products. If the standards call for comparative trials, it will take over 5 years for those products to make it to the market. And they get into the market for higher prices than the ones expected. So, do we need those health standards? Yes or no? Well, we should discuss this because, first of all, we have public health and the health of the population, and the quality standards and entry standards shouldn't be negotiated to begin with. But this depends on what standards we are talking about and what the regulatory framework is, etc. What I'd like to tell you is that the way in which those standards are being defined and discussed in the global scenarios shows that it is limiting competition, and in the scenarios we have today, such as UNASUR, should start to think about this. In the case of the generics in biotechnology, you start from a very complex principle which says that therapeutic proteins, all biotechnological products are proteins that are tested to see what their therapeutic effects are, but they are biosubstances, and some of them are produced through genetic engineering which are not easy to reproduce and characterize, but it's not complex enough so that we won't think that once all the trials have been done, the products have been characterized, and with the breakthroughs of biotechnology, maybe we could think on shortened processes like the ones used for the classic generics, so that competition expands and entry would be fastened up. So we are saying today that the generics of biotechnological products could have the same name in all countries. Each product should have its own name because the proteins are different, because there are differences among them, and this has a direct impact on substitution. If I say that they have different names, of course, the physicians won't be at ease with making a substitution. The same applies to patients, and to healthcare systems will be more careful when selecting a given product. This scenario, which is a triad, represents the mechanism through which competition is being kept out by the use of technical standards, and we should change this. Why? Because it's the expression of a discussion which is very, very much loaded, which we had in the 60s or 70s when the generics first came into the markets, where patents were still in force. The Hatch-Waxman Act of 1984, which talks about the possibility of using the clinical information which was already available after having characterized the productive process of generic products, so as not to repeat trials which were unnecessary with human beings. This is the standard of all healthcare agencies. Classical generics don't have to repeat something which has already been tested. They don't have to answer a research question that has been answered already. And this discussion, well, in order to make it to this act in 1984, there was a heated discussion, and a graduate student of Brown University looked at all this. He analyzed all the process leading to the Hatch-Waxman Act, and it all started with public hearings in 1967 dealing with the asymmetries and the pressure on the use of trademarks in the US, and how physicians were playing along this game of brands, and how expenditure in medications was increasing. This senator, the work of this senator led to what we call the Hatch-Waxman Act today, which is an agreement, a compromise made by the American Medical Association with the senators and with FDA technicians and experts from the ministries to solve the issues of financial sustainability. They said, okay, we'll set up some specific clinical trials, not the ones about therapeutical performance, and this will help us to bring down the preventions on the use of poor quality generics, but we will promote the substitution. And today we have generics and a regulatory framework which accepts that when we know the molecule, when it has been characterized, fully characterized, the clinical trials necessary should be cut down to a minimum so that human beings are not exposed to a product, and to fasten entry into the market. In the case of competition for biotechnological products, today, this was different 10 years ago, try to introduce this simplified approach in the registers of biotechnologicals so as to drive or foster competition, because these biotechnologicals represent a huge expense. Even if we can have an abbreviated registry, there are multiple patents associated with one product, and maybe even if we say a biosimilar will be available or a biogeneric is available, maybe it will be blocked by other secondary patents for the same product. Besides, in the pipeline, there are certain trastuzumab products with specific markers or combinations with other pharmacochemicals, which are coming to the market as patented products and which would be shown, which would be used as an alternative treatment to trastuzumab, even though not all women who need it are receiving trastuzumab today. Women who need it. In Colombia, Caliquia, the competitor to trastuzumab of Roche, which is a combination of the monoclonal antibody with another pharmacochemical product, is 3 times as expensive as trastuzumab. So we are at a crossroad, and there is an issue with biotechnologies which has to be solved. Innovation, quote unquote, is sort of being blocked. In the US, the European Agency, and China are today discussing the guidelines for the regulation of the entry of biotechnologicals, similar biotechnologicals, trying to find simplified approaches that are based on something very important, and that is that technical knowledge and scientific knowledge in this area should be at the service of the needs of public health. Why shouldn't I use that public information? Why shouldn't I allow for generics to use that public health information for their applications? Countries in Latin America are regulating this, but they are suffering a huge pressure because they are using the approach that was used 10 years ago. They're not using the simplified approach yet. However, fortunately, Brazil, Ecuador, and Colombia have issued regulations which, without changing the technical and scientific and quality principles of comparison and reproducibility guarantee, set up the possibility for using the available clinical information for the application for the license for a generic. These countries are changing the trend, which in the year 2000, the European Agency and the European companies set forth as the paradigm for the registration of biosimilars. For this to happen, I'm coming to an end. For this to happen, well, this was not easy, however. Having these regulations passed was not easy, and maybe the country that suffered most pressure in terms of geopolitics from the US and from other countries, from the north, and from some regulatory and multilateral scenarios was Colombia. After 4 years of discussions, 3 years of heated discussions, the executive decree I've just mentioned has been signed. It was signed in September, but it's still challenged today because Colombia dared not to deal with this in a subtle way, but they clearly said it in clear words. Today, with a technical breakthrough, it's possible to characterize proteins, so it's possible to use the information that is already available as supporting the documentation for a license, of course, with some technical limitations. The scenarios of this global debate are many, and these are the discussion arenas for technical standards such as ICDRA, the Association of Health Agencies of the World, the Pan American Harmonization Network, which is ICRA for the Americas, but we also have other scenarios of political discussions, UNASUR, and the multilateral scenario, WHO. This debate and these discussions took place for over 10 years only in the technical standardization scenarios, ICRA and PARF. It was never taken to the political scenario, except that for the case of UNASUR last year, which understood the importance of this issue. It understood that it was there where the distortions to the model and the elements which prevented competition from taking place were, and they submitted the resolution to the World Assembly of WHO, Resolution 67.21, called Access to Biotherapeuticals, including biosimilars, talking about whose safety and efficacy have been proven The leadership in this case was in the hands of Argentina, but there was a consistent approach joined by all the UNASUR countries. If we could tell the story of that negotiation, well, it's really interesting because though it was a very technically based discussion, the diplomats of UNASUR had strategic interventions and they negotiated tete-a-tete with the US, Europe, and the FDA, and really threatened other resolutions that were of interest to the countries of the North. And they say, we will only pass your resolutions if you accept this one. If this resolution hadn't been approved in May, Colombia wouldn't have been able to have the resolution issued in September. And why? Well, because as a clear-cut language was included in the resolution saying that the technical standards are not barriers to competition, must not be barriers to competition. There must be quality criteria that should not block out competition, that the information that is biased and external pressure should be left out of the negotiations on health regulations, and that the scientific breakthroughs should be at the service of health, of the needs and capabilities of each country, thanks to the fact that that language was clearly used in this. The same language is used in our executive decree, and this helped to carry out the negotiations in Colombia. These are the main contents of the resolution of the World Assembly of the WHO. It involves several themes, and we need to make a follow-up on them because there's a mandate to inform in 2016 to the WHO Assembly what progress has been made in this arena. And there's another important issue here. There is a guideline of the WHO on biosimilarities and comparability for the registration of biogenerics. That guideline represents the paradigm we had 10 years ago. It hasn't included yet the technical breakthroughs that would make it possible to use an abbreviated or shortened registry to improve the competition in the market of biotechnologicals and to guarantee that the speed of entry of the generics will be higher. And of course, they will have better prices and easier access.
So I leave here the main conclusion of this matter. I think it is our responsibility not only to have led the resolution, but to ensure the follow-up of its implementation. Little will be done if the resolution is left there and not implemented. That means that we have to think and have an influence on the expert decisions of the WHO, so all this public health perspective would be included in the guidelines, not only on biosimilars, but also in other guidelines of technical standards. Thank you. Thank you, Claudia.